First Man is a 2018 film that covers the story of Neil Armstrong as he deals with the death of his daughter and his goal to reach the moon. Directed by the amazing Damien Chazelle, who has made works such as Whiplash, La La Land, and his latest work Babylon, I can't say I dislike any of his films. I love all his work and I will probably be talking about all of them at some point, but I feel that First Man sticks out of his portfolio because of its different setting, tone, genre, and subject matter. This one is so different from the rest because of its very somber tone and action flight scenes. I love its subtle acting and its slow pace. Some of the shots here are out of this world and the music fits the scene so well, with its measure of otherworldliness and its nostalgia for the purity of life. The sound design and editing would usually get no love or batting a 10 here. Of course, I had to address the fact that this is based on real-world events and a book, but I'm not really concerned with the factual reality of the film. While movies about real-world events should try to portray things accurately and factually, information like that should be sought after in books, experts, or documentaries. I don't look to biopics for 100% realism, but just enough reality to tell a compelling story and for the connection to its characters, something that films excel at. But let's start from the top. In the first scene, we see Neil Armstrong taking a flight to the edge of our atmosphere. I remember the first time when I watched this in IMAX, this opening scene was thrilling. I knew immediately that I would enjoy every second of this film. It features no dialogue from our main character, and even if there was, we wouldn't be able to hear it because of the plane's battle with the sky. The shots here are shaky and often very close up to give a feeling of pressure and claustrophobia. There's a rich mixture of natural sound design and music. This scene is basically the whole movie but on a smaller scale. We see Neil work to accomplish a goal. He reaches a peak of peace, a moment of silence and pleasure, and then he is faced with the life-threatening problem that he will barely be able to escape. And finally, a return to normalcy. But at the core of this story, it's really about grief, control, and the lengths that we will go to feel okay with ourselves. We see a man struggling with his sorrow over death of a child. Ryan Gosling gives a very held-back performance here. He never screams or monologues his feelings. There isn't a scene where he ugly cries while the music builds, but we see a performance of still faces and blank expressions, where we as the audience need to fill in the spaces with the context of the rest of the story. Most of the shots here are headshots and close-ups of Ryan Gosling's face, looking at things. Neil's character carries a burden that he's not sure how to handle, and as the film goes on, we see the ever-growing emotional distance he creates with the people he loves. Neil is a doer. He fixes things and gets the job done, and he excels at it, especially when the job is beyond others' abilities. He thrives in the struggle of new fires and new pains. So when his daughter dies of a disease that he can neither understand or can fix, it breaks him, launching himself fully into work both as a distraction and a weapon for his grief. Throughout the movie, we see him looking up the moon, longing to be there. Maybe he thinks if he can land on it, it will bring his daughter back, or some kind of closure. This twists the moon into his daughter symbolically. Scene to scene, most of the shots are handheld that range from steady and more calm, lighthearted scenes to heavy shake where you can barely make out anything. In the more intense scenes, we see a racking of focus, quick zoom-ins, harsh cuts, and breaks of the 180 rule, which helps to disorient us like the pilots. The only time we get steady shots is when Neil completes a task, which only lasts for a couple of brief moments, and when the moon landing happens. This contrast makes the shots on the moon feel very different from the rest of the film, almost as if we've entered into another dimension, where the world moves differently, and is linked with the emotional catharsis of the character. But we'll get back to that later. I love how Neil is a mixed bag when it comes to how he acts. Sometimes he's laughing and playing with his kids, dancing to Lunar Rhapsody with his wife, and sharing a beer with the boys. But other times we see him cold and calculating, not willing to talk or open up, not even to his own wife.
Has he ever talked to you about Karen yet?
Not really, no.
Has he talked to you about her? No.
The scene where he goes to the backyard to watch the moon and Ed comes up to him. You expect a back and forth or an emotional explosion, but Neil just points out that he went outside to be alone and doesn't want to talk to anyone. I also love the personal view we get here of the moon landing. A space movie would be expected to show off more and more fantastic set pieces and a version of space travel easily digestible for the audience, but instead we see it from an extremely small view of Neil and the other pilots. This strong comparison of the large NASA spacecrafts with the everyday family events reminds us that these people were mortal humans, just like us. Showing that perspective is key to the story. The perspective of Neil's emotional state, the race against the Soviets, of American values and ingenuity, the lives of the ones at home, and that Buzz is not a good person.
Clearly the error was the approach. He was coming in too slow to reach the runway.
What?
This perspective is used very well with the Gemini 8 scene, where it looks like a literal coffin, and that our characters are entering into an environment of danger, one that no man has been able to conquer before. The small details really sell this scene, to the bird flying by the window, to the belt failing, and Neil using the mirror to help navigate his direction, and of course the fly. Oh god, not the fly. We never get a shot of the rocket outside during liftoff. We get stuck inside the shaky tin can just like the pilots, not knowing whether it's doing its job or about to explode into a million pieces, holding our breath until some kind of release finally comes our way. Here we see Neil in his element, doing what he does best, and even through the failure, he succeeds. He has it under control. He goes beyond what is expected, what is even possible for the mission. Victory is in sight. Neil even opens up to Ed about Karen, even if it's only for a brief moment. Then, tragedy. 3 brave men lose their lives. More deaths, more problems. The dream seems to be slipping away. The bills are rising and the people want answers. Is landing on the moon worth it? Can we risk more lives? Is it too late to turn back? Here we see the toll of this kind of living brings on a family, on a marriage, and on one's mind. Things like these are not usually brought up when we speak of the landing. We already know the result, and we think the answer is easy. Of course, we must move forward, but at what cost will we pay to feel okay with ourselves, to have a sense of control?
For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Prior to the statement, the President will telephone each of the widows-to-be, and clergymen will adopt the same procedure as a burial at sea, commending their souls to the deepest of the deep.
Here we come to the last leg of our trip. In this launch, we see a mixture of internal shots and external shots of the rocket, giving a mixture of dreadful fear and an incredible sense of awe. This is one of the finest missions of mankind. And as I already mentioned before, but once they reach close to the moon, the cinematography changes greatly. We see a perfect use of the pure blackness of space and its never-ending emptiness, the call of the void. The lunar surface looks uninviting and almost threatening. And even though I know they land successfully and make it back alive, I can't help but feel the intensity of this landing. Every shot, every cut feels like it could be Neil's and Buzz's last. The silence of the capsule opening feels deafening, and the shots of Gosling on the surface are the best of the film, and some of the best I've ever seen. Here, the visual medium of film takes its greatest strength, putting you right where the characters are, and as if you were there yourself. The only thing left is for Neil to finally let go, as if he needed the silent void of space and the whole moon's surface to finally come peace with his daughter's passing, overcoming his earthly grief on the lunar isolation. While it is funny that instead of going to therapy or talking about his feelings, Neil uses his grief as fuel to reach the moon and finally settle his emotional pain on a crater the size of a football field. Whether it is right or wrong, I do not know, but this film makes me feel that sooner or later, in our own way, we all find our own peace. That while nothing is ever perfect, we must keep going, even if that means letting go of the past, doing something our loved ones would have wanted us to do, to make something bigger than ourselves and to seek further horizons, but also to not forget the present and to love what still remains. Thank you for watching.